that this person is going to flip switches around their career, around their income. They understand they have no sexual attraction whatsoever, but there's this line. It's like if they just say, stop abusing people like this. This is a business interview. That's it. He'll blackball them. He'll make their life difficult, etc. But on the other hand, he'll make it easy. And so this is the coercion of the protectorate, of the healthy self-defense, into an enabler of the abuse. And it works like this. The abused pipes up and says no. The self-defense says that's not a good idea and resists. Now, at that point, the defense is met with an intense and an upkeep in overwhelming force of some kind. And this is particularly the case in major imbalances of power. It's met with, I'm not going to be happy with you. I'm not going to love you. I'm not going to like you. I'm not, if you listen to the tape, it's like you don't want to lose our friendship over just not wanting to watch me masturbate or something like that. That's a Harvey Weinstein clip. Please don't jeopardize our friendship, meaning I'm going to cut you off unless you perform sexual acts that you don't want to do. What's the big deal? It's just 5-10 minutes, whatever. I want to get off and dump my feeling that I don't matter as a human being onto you. And let's both collude to say that my life will be safer if I go along and have a friend like Harvey Weinstein. And so you have the fighting the self-protection. Now, this usually gets knocked down in childhood. The child says no. The parent slaps them with enough force to understand that the child doesn't have that kind of force to go back to the parent. Now a rewiring of defense comes in, because the first defense was to say that's not good for my body, that's not good for my psyche, this feels terrible. No. But then it's like, well, then it gets even worse. That feels even worse for my body, that feels even more terrifying, more lonely, etc. But if I go along with the abuse, then I still have it's bad, but it's not as bad as if I'm being punished for fighting the abuse. And so the inner warrior or inner protector comes away with a new learning. The best way to keep alive is to make abusers feel comfortable. If you don't disturb them too much, if you don't make them look bad while they're abusing you, they will feel better. And they won't hurt you so much. And because they'll feel guilty, they'll give you little perks and stuff because you're going along with their addiction. Maybe they have a power addiction, a sex addiction. You're enabling all that. You're keeping silent. So you're going to get parts. You're going to get roles. You're going to get jobs and money and this and that if you go along with the system. You are not going to get any of that. You are going to be blackballed if you don't. And so you have the attack of the inner defense in such a way that the inner defense feels more scared of speaking the truth than it does in enabling the abuse. Now you've turned the defender into the ally. It's kind of like marching up on a town with 100 million troops and saying, do we want to do this the easy way or the hard way? You're all going to get slaughtered. Just let us rape some of your virgins. Give us all the food you don't have to eat. Let us go through and make fun of you and make you feel worthless, and we'll be on our way. We may kill a few kids, but it'll be nothing compared to the complete fire and desolation we're going to turn on you if you dare to fight us and say, how dare you invade our town? 100 million troops. What did the French do in World War II? That's the dynamic when the defense is turned out of fear of the aggressor. See, this is the most dangerous point because here we're getting into insanity. Now truths come up in the psyche and say, this isn't right. And the protector says, it's not safe to say that. Don't think that. Now that has to be pushed down. Now the danger in here is insanity. If you believe that the good guys are the people who abuse you the most, and the bad guys are people who speak the truth. Well, now you're in hell because you've already gotten locked into the prison of inadequacy. You are so unvaluable that even when you piped up, it's like, we don't care about you. We want what we want. I want to fuck you the way I want to fuck you. Shut up, bitch, and take it. Okay. Now that I got that off my chest, you want a little diamond ring? You want a little dress so that you'll do it again? Or do you want me knocking at your door and you know how I can be? You see, that's the question. Pretend everything's wonderful? Or go into hell where overwhelming force is being pushed against you in a dynamic where this cult says, I don't want to know about it. I don't want to know. You see, there's so little protection in so many of these dynamics. You see, because the revenge can be fine. Okay, you don't hurt me by beating me because you've got a restraining order. You just take custody of my kids and sadistically turn them, into someone horrible. Because you know you can hurt me better that way. Because I don't matter. You matter. In this competition to break out of the cultural prison. So this is the next wave of is decimating the defense. Now my defense was decimated when I had shared the most painful feelings I had ever shared to another human being. I had asked for an apology. I had asked for support. I had asked to bring this out into the community. And every one of those was met with anxiety and fear or anger or pushback or silence from my entire community leadership. And I'm feeling smaller and smaller. Every interaction I have, I feel smaller. Every interaction I have, you are not valuable. And then it moves into this other dynamic, which is incredibly painful, which is I start to understand that what they're doing and not doing is that they are afraid of me. And I understand that that's not love. I understand that that's not saying that I'm valuable. That's saying that their fear of me is valuable. So now it goes into an even more lonely domain, like how much can I manipulate these people to treating me right? Understanding that what they're doing is out of fear. It's not for my honor. It's not because I matter. And so then, and then of course there's all the cult abuse in our culture around homosexuality. So in all the shame, then I fell in love with a guy that treats me like shit, a guy that's given me hundreds of messages that say you are not valuable. You're not valuable enough to be friends. You're not valuable enough to respond to your emails. You're not valuable enough to protect from my own ignorance. You're not valuable enough to protect healthy sexual boundaries. You're not valuable enough to do any of that. And you're not valuable enough to tell the truth to. You're just someone that I resent because it reminds me of my inadequacies, and I don't want to feel that. And I've got this position of power that lets me continually suggest that there's something wrong with you so that I can feel better. And this tension for the scared little boy in the reenactment of regression and abuse, etc., is, can I tell Dad the truth without him hating me? And when your dad is a child with their own unresolved abuse, you cannot. Because children hate feeling small, and they take revenge if they have the power to do that. That's what little children do. They kill people who make them feel bad. Well, we have a whole host of grown-ups. They're more than happy to do that if it can be gotten away with, in some foreign country or whatever. So this is the next level. There's another level of abuse that goes on around alienating the victim. Now, this happens, for an obvious reason. if obvious abuse has occurred, that would transfer and make everyone say, wow, that's really irresponsible, and lose the abuser would lose cult ranking, basically, because it's a fight for the external over the internal. The abuser is not trying to feel, like they're great in themselves. They know at some level that they're shit. That's why they're trying to compensate so much by having cult ranking. They know that. And the abuser is in with them. It's like, you're a shit, I'm a shit, we're both shits. And we'll have a little competition to see who can make each other feel the shittiest. And if I charge you $175 an hour, I'll feel better and you'll feel more shitty. So let's do it that way. But you don't want this secret to come out. And so what Peter did by not telling his colleagues what happened, and by telling his wife after the fact in such a way that made me into the enemy, this happened 10 years earlier, is Sarah Sandhill, Peter's wife, was a therapist of mine and a facilitator. And her job is to put my well-being above her own fears and ignorances and all of that, because that's what someone taking money to help someone grow does. That's what works. But Peter needs to feel good about himself. And so, in both the first and second wave of abuse over a 10-year period, Peter turned Sarah into someone who was afraid of me rather than someone who wanted to help me. So that's alienating the victim. And, the U.S. government does that in character assassination of, people that are revealing, like, if you look at how it treated Edward Snowden, who fulfilled his constitutional oath to protect the Constitution of the United States. And so his government betrayed its own constitution. And Edward Snowden stood up about it. And what did his government do? His government chased him all around the world, calling up and bullying and threatening consulates in every country in the world to make sure that only Ecuador, one country in the world, would protect Edward Snowden. But then it revoked the passport in mid-flight. And the whole goal is to shame and teach whistleblowers that if they tell the truth about egregious human rights abuses, about breaking the law, about constitutional violations, that they will be punished. Because that's how you use overwhelming force to break the self-protection down. And so Snowden was forced to take asylum in Russia, not his choice at all, because Russia was the only one that felt it had the clout, and it played in with its own game. Russia doesn't care about human beings, but Russia likes having a Snowden in their pocket. And so everyone learns in that dynamic that human beings and even the law doesn't matter. The biggest abuser matters. And see, this is why it is a global disease. We watch this disease play out 100,000 times a year in the way that authority corrupts and abuses and knocks down. If you read the Clinton Chronicles, etc., about the women that were abused and that threatened to come forward, the cuts to their dogs, the flat tires, the stalkings, the mysterious murders. You don't have to go far in our cult to see power and sexual abuse playing out all over the place. And it's usually the victim that gets marginalized and shamed and punished, unless you've got a face of power big enough to take down the bully. That's when the culture participates. And that is a very sad message, because these people are living with their tragedy for 5, 10, 20 years with zero people being interested in helping them. But then if something ties into a geopolitical agenda, then suddenly there's help. Not for the human being, but for a power shift. for making a point. And everyone watching that knows that they don't matter. The votes matter. The power structure matters. The cult ranking, desperately clung to often by people who are the biggest abuse survivors of all, which is why they need that ranking to compensate more than anyone else. Desperately climbing. I mean, have you ever thought about how miserable the United States presidency is? Would you wish that on your worst enemy? Can you imagine? I give you the presidency tomorrow. 18-hour days. Half the country hates you. Everything you do under the spotlight. You can do very little, pressured on all sides by special interests. Difficulty sleeping. You don't have time to repair a fight with your wife. It's an absolute nightmare. And then everyone says, "So, Mr. President, what are you doing for the country?" And you can barely get through a few papers a day and corrupt, and you realize you can't do a goddamn thing about it. But you're at the top of the ranking system, and that's what everyone looks to you for, because you climbed the rank. It doesn't matter if you're happy. It doesn't matter if you're authentic. Who would want that job? It's absolute criminal, pathological, traumatizing abuse to shove that on almost anyone. And yet, who are the people clawing, to get up there? Trump was made to feel incredibly small by his father, and no one intervened. So he figured out that if he had money and power, everyone paid attention. So he's been doing that ever since. You see, there's a big cost to not caring for little children. What if Trump had actually had a single grown-up adult who put him above some of his misogynistic abuses and stood up to his father on the basis of his own decency? What if one staff member had been willing to get fired to protect a little boy from learning to be a bully? Well, Trump might have been someone who wouldn't sell everything out just to climb the ranking system. So it's not, nobody wins in this dynamic is my point. The bullies, the presidents, they're as miserable as everyone else, playing the game as frenetically as everyone else. How do we get that terrified small part that feels completely worthless to feel like they have some value just for being a human being? And it's very hard to get that message in our culture. Now, the breaking of container and alienating the victim begins with the acts of abuse. So if you're part of a political party and you sleep with an underage hooker, we already have no interest in the hooker. That's just a given, right? The people following the story, they want to see what happens to the politician. We have no interest in hookers. We could go down the street in 30 minutes and help a hooker if we wanted to help hookers. We have no interest in that. But we have an enormous fascination, so, go and do it if it's interesting to you. Nobody's ever stopped any of us from going down to be sensitive and kind and help, not important. But a politician can be knocked down by a hooker. And so the whole story follows the politician. The lies they're going to tell, how they're going to get married, to distract, the way they're going to declare health issues and blah, blah, blah. This is all very interesting because this is the ranking system in the cult. But one of if you just watch the way anyone who becomes an embarrassment to a power structure is disowned, marginalized, and Trump's, of course, been doing a wonderful job of educating us of just how this works. So when he's teaming with his buddy, Epstein, and flying in his jets, Epstein's a good guy. When Epstein is obviously convicted for pedophilia, then Trump never knew the guy. So this is how you alienate someone. And so you abuse someone in such a way that it would embarrass the power structure, and then suddenly the abuse survivor gets cast to the wolves to protect the power structure. And so as soon as Peter Sandhill was willing to act in a way that every jury would find illegal, that every therapist would find reprehensible, that the high public would say that's disgusting. You don't take money, get someone high, and escalate a romantic relationship and then break their heart and then blame it on them. What kind of fucked up coward does that? So when you behave in a way that creates alienation, that damages the political power structure, in this case of the Human Awareness Institute, what Peter Sandhill is doing is turning me into an enemy. See, they could fire him, but then Sarah Sandhill would put up a fuss, and she's a facilitator as well. If we lose 2 facilitators, it's a vulnerable time. Oh, gosh. You know, you guys aren't the problem. Dane's the problem. Let's, cut off his emails. We're not going to deal with this. This isn't he shouldn't have hired you. You did the best. Look, listen to him seducing you in the tape. He was interested in having a sexual relationship with you. And, how were you to know that under the influences of high doses of psychedelics that's what, you meant well. We see. Let's cohese, and all of us will get tighter. And what we'll do is we'll exclude the smallest bit, which is, in many cases, the sexual abuse survivor. Let's get rid of them. They're the bit that's just makes everyone feel bad. And so it's your fault. And the message again, you are not valuable. Our feelings are valuable. You're not valuable. And so if you insist on telling the truth, you have to understand we're going to be mean to you. We're going to cut off all your support. You won't be allowed to attend any events with your community. No one will know. You'll be a lonely secret. Otherwise, you can be a hero and say, how much you've grown from all this and stuff like that. So which is it going to be, And there's, of course, the little boy wants to do anything their abuser needs and wants. The little boy, what do I have to do to be loved by dad? Oh, it's very simple. This never happened. You never happened. Your feelings don't matter. My feelings matter. I'm a great therapist. That's what I have to do? All my loneliness has to be buried and no apology. Yeah, that's what you have to do. That doesn't feel like love. It feels like abuse. That feels sick. I feel horrible. Well, you're the one pushing for it, so we're going to alienate your support. And one of the interesting things, and this ties into wealthy people as well, is like, let's say you have a wealthy billionaire who just trashes some of his employees. Well, the employee might go to other people in the community and say, look, I'm being trashed, this is wrong. But you see, the other people in the community have business dealings with the billionaire. And the same message is there. You're not important, the money's important. You see, you're not that valuable. I'd love to be able to help you. Yes, he is a jerk, but we'd like a $3 million listing in our real estate company, and so we're not going to say anything. In fact, if you jeopardize our $3 million listing by bringing this up, we are going to be mad at you. Don't you? Are you so selfish? You think your sexual abuse is so important? We've got a $3 million listing hanging on there, and you're ruining that. How's your sister going to get married without that listing? How's this? Shut the fuck up. Because this person's on top of the ranking system. So you've got no support. And that's another wave in how the abuse cycle works. And this, of course, deepens helplessness, invisibility, and loneliness, which collapses, your body starts to collapse, etc., because that's what we live for as human beings. We live for survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, developing our gifts. And when our most important truths are viewed sociopathically by a culture as a threat, we're actually being incentivized to die, to stop meeting our human needs, to placate the power structure around us. And that's what the breaking of container and alienating and victimhood and stuff does. So when Peter Sandhill lied to his wife, he can't go to his wife and ask her to help him fix me as things go wrong, because he's already betrayed her. And so he's got to frame me into an enemy so that I don't get help. So he betrays his wife. He then betrays me. I need help, and my facilitator isn't there to help me. She is there dealing with her own feelings of betrayal and his betrayal. Then I go to the Human Awareness Institute, and in the midst of their own financial crisis, they've got a huge financial liability created by Peter Sandhill. Now, they're, of course, furious with Peter Sandhill, but they're scared of me. How can we get this thing shut up? That's how sociopathic people behave. And everyone in a state of scarcity is in a sociopathic state. If your survival is in jeopardy, it's fight, flight, freeze. There's no empathy. And so I get the message emotionally, tonally, and in a whole pattern of actions. I don't matter. You don't matter. You don't matter. Our fears matter. And this is, of course, tremendously sad. So now I have a whole mountain of grief and betrayal on top of the broken heart. Then there's the terror and trauma from my body collapsing, rippling into financial effects. And all of this, no one's asking about this, because the message is you don't matter. If we asked, how is this affecting your life and how could we help? It would say you matter. So we can't ask it, because we need to feel good about this abuse dynamic. Now, when you communicate deep and vulnerable feelings, and someone pretends that they don't matter, what they're really saying is that this isn't your tribe. This isn't your family. You don't belong. The way that you can tell if a human being belongs in a culture, in a family, is if they're in pain, does anyone do anything about it? One. And if they're in joy and happiness, does anyone celebrate? Empathy is the biological cue of whether you belong. Now, if you are excluded, the message is you don't belong. And cultures, when they exclude people, whether it's a cult in the case of, a Human Awareness Institute or anything like that, cultures, when they exclude people, they never go to the person they're excluding and say, we are full of shit. We don't know what to do with you. We don't know how to benefit from your gifts. We don't know how to overcome the challenges that you present. We don't know how to bring out the best in you. We don't know anything about you. We are so ignorant and have failed so miserably in dealing with you that we're scared of failing again. And because we don't want to fail again, and because we're the majority, we're the group, and you're just one, we're going to push you out because we don't know what else to do. Now, this is never done. It's always done silently, like my email accounts were just blocked one day. Nobody said we're going to disconnect your email because we're afraid you'll tell the truth. They just vanished. It's like, you're not even worth telling. We're not going to tell you we're going to do it. We're going to break our own policies to do so. We're going to break the law to do so. We're going to break the spirit of the law to do so. We are going to fuck you over by cutting off your friends suddenly on our platform. Bing. And we're going to be communicating indirectly to anyone else. There's a side here. The person we've abused is the threat. We're not the threat. They're the threat. And they shouldn't be so angry. They should have forgiven me. This is another kind of should message Peter Sandhill told me from his attorney, that I should forgive him. So you have the shaming impact that say your feelings don't matter. And there's also a shock aspect. Ann Watts had been my therapist. And so when I was doing therapy that had nothing to do with her liability, my feelings mattered. So I assumed my feelings would still matter when I talked to her. But they didn't. Her voice was tight and controlled. She didn't respond. She didn't advocate the way she did when she wasn't involved in the interest. So suddenly I understood. all of that bravado that she was saying, you're worth it and this in our sessions, was because I was paying her and she had nothing on the line. As soon as she had her own reputation on the line, now her needs, me before you, comes before my need to be validated, when I wouldn't have been abused if she had not recommended Peter Sandhill on the very last time, just before the abuse. If she'd said, I have reservations about this guy that I've trained, please talk to me before hiring Peter Sandhill, I would have done so and not hired him. But instead, there's another effusive endorsement. We're here to help you, blah, blah, blah. Let us love you. Come see us privately. Peter's a wonderful man. And so there's the thing. Your safety doesn't matter. Me having a good relationship with my colleague is more important than my therapeutic relationship to my patient. My colleague relationship versus the one who's paying me to put me first. I'm betraying that one because it's a marginal relationship. The colleague relationship is more central to me, and it's me before you. When you do not acknowledge feelings, when you do not ask about feelings, when you don't respond to feelings, it is a rejection of the belonging protocol. Belonging, we care, tell us all about it. You don't belong, take your feelings elsewhere, we're not doing anything about it. Now, avoiding easy repair is another of the abuse waves. Because if you've traumatized someone and shamed them and fucked them over and confused them and made them feel crazy and worthless and all of that, there are some very easy repairs. One could be a group of 7 people coming over and saying, we're not going to stand for this, you do matter. And just an hour with 7 people saying, no, you matter, this was not your fault, we are here for you and you're going to get through this. Done. 7 people overcome the trauma because you're not feeling like you're in survival anymore, socially, financially, physically, with health, and in force. Because most bullies are cowards. If you've got 7 people supporting the victim, they may have been happy to do all kinds of shit behind closed doors when no one was watching and no one would ever find out about it. But as soon as you've got 7 resourceful people willing to take a stand, well, suddenly most bullies go find another victim, is what they do in our culture, because we don't care enough to rehabilitate the bully in our culture. We just care enough about one person, our friend. Go bully someone else. And they do. They go bully someone else because we don't care about them. We just care about our friend. But 7 people for an hour could have reassured me. When I called the facilitator board, and gave them a 45-minute voicemail of all of Peter Sandhill's abuses and mentioned the 10-hour recording and blah, 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 they could have just said, here, responded to my request and said, hey, this is wrong. We've got your back. You belong here, and we are going to keep you and the community safe, period. Relax. We're going to include you. How can we help? What do we need to do? Very easy to do. It takes 5 minutes. You create an enormous field of support around the abuse survivor, that they're no longer carrying the trauma of this continual cultural pattern of isolation, dissociation, punishment, blame, shame for everyone else so that the abuser can look good to themselves and their peers. That takes an hour, and it lifts 80% of the trauma. Instead, the Human Awareness Institute did the opposite. Asked me to sign a legal contract promising never to tell anyone in my life, not to be compensated by a penny, to never sue the Human Awareness Institute, and not acknowledge that it was a Human Awareness Institute issue that they were. That was the statement I was being asked to sign. While they met behind my back, I was the only one not invited to decide how to manage the publicity. You are not valuable. Our publicity is valuable. You are not valuable. Our publicity is valuable. Your needs aren't important. Our defense protocol is important. Your feelings don't matter. our feelings matter. Our fear and insecurity, they matter more than you. And so you have the avoidance of easy repair. Now, one of the things that makes this so striking with the Human Awareness Institute is I asked, without understanding trauma, without studying sexual abuse or anything, what I asked every facilitator who had recommended Peter and who had been my workshop facilitators, pledging to create a world in which I won, I said, please listen to me and please hold me as soon as possible. I mentioned I couldn't drive safely. That was what triggered the event. No one came. No one called, and I was the only one excluded from the meeting. The meeting set up a defense protocol to distance itself from the abuse. And Peter began feeling like the martyr, this poor me, I just tried to help, and this and that and the other. And so in the entire process, no one ever asked, what do you need? How can we help? How are you doing? What's our impact? Well, and there was this stonewalling. So the point of easy repair is missed. Now, this is a very important point for the abuser and the victim to understand, and the larger community. This could have been locked up in 5 minutes by one adult putting me first and communicating solidarity. One adult could have done that, but that adult was not there in any part of the Human Awareness Institute. It wasn't there. And that was the point of collapse into PTSD. Now, the reason why this easy repair, how dumb do you have to be that you can't ask someone in horrific pain, how can we help? How dumb do you have to be? This is not an issue of intelligence. This is an issue of fear. Because if you say, we're here for you and we're going to do what this takes, it means transparency with the community. And so this isolation and alienation protocol is part of maintaining an existing power structure of any kind and making the abuser feel good at the expense. And the abuser should feel safe also. Like Peter was really worried that he would lose his job, and he told me that, and then his interest in follow-up disappeared as soon as I acted to help him keep his job. As soon as I helped him with his fear, he became belligerent again. Why am I being so difficult? Because he's safe now. Now let's see how much he can make himself feel good at my expense. You're overreacting. No, that's not what He even lied and said, I never said that. I said, Peter, I've listened to the 10-hour recording many times more than you have. You're so arrogant you didn't bother to listen to it, and you're telling me you didn't say things you're saying on the tape? And it's like, thank goodness I have a tape. Thank goodness I don't have to, listen to the belligerence of someone so dumb that when they have that available to them, they'd rather spin their version of events separate from what's on the tape. And then so he quickly shifted his focus to what wasn't on the tape and how I'd gotten all that wrong. Because the goal of someone trying to feel good about themselves is to spin it in a way that they're doing everything right. Now, this is just a point of mathematics. If you as an abuser start with the vantage point that I'm doing everything right and I'm a great therapist and all that, and all kinds of atrocious things happen to your clients, nearly kill them. Well, I did everything right. We've got that settled. All this horrible stuff is happening. I never realized what a shitty client I had. I had no idea that my client made so many mistakes, and Peter hinted at that, when I talked about the brokenheartedness. He said, oh, I just thought you would forget about it. But you listened to the recording, you went deeper in. It's like it was my fault. I kept asking Peter to clarify the romantic relationship. He kept dodging it. I'd listened to the recording. And I expected people to do what they said they were going to do, which was follow up, particularly in a professional relationship where you're paying $107. That wasn't on Peter's agenda. So it was my fault that I actually retained my feelings rather than just forgetting about the whole thing. Because that's what I was supposed to do. In Peter Sandhill's narrative of how he was a brilliant therapist who naturally obliged his clients who wanted to have sex with him, and then just assumed they would magically get better and forget about it. But of course, I made a mistake. I remembered the truth. Oh, what's Peter to do? What's Peter to do? He's a great therapist. I'm a shitty client. And the dreariness in his voice is like, oh, this big burden I'm having. You're ruining my life. I deserve to have my marriage. Well, then don't lie to your wife. Don't break the law. Keep your facilitator agreements. Don't break every therapeutic guideline in the book. Some part of you doesn't believe you deserve your wife, or you wouldn't behave that way. So take that conversation to yourself. Don't then burden, because this then becomes the next wave of abuse, where the abuser, because you can think of this disease as an infection in which the abuser has a deeper level of infection than the victim. Because at one time, the abuser was the victim. And then through the same conspiracy of silence and all that in the parental system, the abuse didn't get healed. The message that they didn't matter as a human being got in too deep. So then the question is, how do they get rid of that message that's penetrated the psyche? As well, let's make someone else feel terrible. And this is, of course, not conscious, because that would involve responsibility and blah, blah, blah. And so we just partition these things because they're taboo in a culturally and psychologically illiterate culture. Well, the whole point is to pretend that nothing's going on. So Peter's inadequacies at some point reached a point where they had to be transferred. And what better position to do that than a therapist? And a popular therapist at that, with charm and this and that. What better way to do it? And so every time his crappy therapy doesn't work, he can just sigh, and say, like, I'll extend my crappy therapy another 10 minutes, and maybe it'll get working, and I did the best I can. You're just not cut out to be a client, And that's how it ended, 10 years ago. Was I felt much worse than when the cycle began. I felt confused, terrified, dissociative, very uncomfortable. And Peter said it was all love, and he empathized with the limitations, that I couldn't receive his true love, but that, within my limitations, he did the best he could. And you just can't help them all, because some of them are irretrievably broken, irrevocably shattered, that even the best healer just can't put all the pieces that other people damaged, back together again. But boy, the heroic effort and all of that. And so that's the message that gets transferred. And again, when you understand all the abuses, like in the 10 years prior when he expressed sexual interest, when he asked me to do MDMA with him in his house and pay him for that, and he was going to take it too, you realize that was abuse too. And of course you felt scared because he wasn't a safe therapist. That's not what you do to young, traumatized, heterosexual clients. You don't tell them about your sexual attraction to them, blah, blah, blah. You don't arrive in the therapy session with an erection. That's not what you do. If you want to help your patient, if you want to enjoy your lust and be paid for it, it's a nice position to be, isn't it, right? You get to pick your lovers out of your client base, have sex with the ones that you want to, cover it up by kind of manipulating the situation so it's in a gray area or not quite breaking the rules. Get participation from the client who doesn't know what's going on but likes the praise and appreciation and stuff, and get them to pay. And then you pay them for it, and then you can talk about how heroic your effort is, and and they just keep failing, despite your heroic effort. And me before you, I'm big and important and high status and valuable, and you're just a horrible, unvaluable person who isn't as popular as me, doesn't, has to pay to have intimacy, and just can't cut it. That despite my, you just couldn't do it. You came close. I was wonderful, but you, the patient, you just didn't heal. That's life. Let's move on to the next debacle. And so the secrecy and denial is then the last wave, and it is more than anything when the Human Awareness Institute sued me to shut down the website to tell the public what they refused to tell anyone, because it wasn't a high issue according to them. And they wouldn't tell me why it wasn't a high issue, because I explained many reasons it was a high issue, but that they just couldn't understand that. And so they were silent. That's what you do when you want to stonewall someone. And this is also an important aspect of abuse, which is the wave of defense. What defense is at its core is setting up a system where your perceived opponent, now remember, we're talking delusion here because there is no opponent. A therapeutic patient is never the enemy of the therapist. Never. Now, when it's not therapy, when the therapist is using a power play, etc., to kind of fuel grandiosity, to overcome unhealed inadequacy, then there is a big competition. And this came up with Matt, my chiropractor, as well, because as he's abusing me emotionally and helping me physically, I'm pointing out things going on. Now he wants to be called Dr. Egan and this and that and the other, and don't tell me how to do my job and this and that and the other, because it wasn't okay to acknowledge that Matt was behaving sociopathically in multiple levels and how that was impacting, and that wasn't okay to acknowledge. And in the secrecy and denial aspect, this is a message that says you are not valuable. Our reputations are valuable. And so when Hai sued to shut down the website, and of course lost the lawsuit, because I've never tried to make any money off of this, I've just tried to warn the public that if they're going for relationship coaching and advice, they should go to someone who actually puts the patient ahead of their own fears and ignorances and shames and all of that, and who isn't going to cause you PTSD and charge you for it. Now, they also disconnected me from the email list. Peter Rangel came out and said, I'm not going to listen to your emails. Other people just ignored them. There's this whole thing. And, and then as this kept escalating and feeling worse and worse, it was tried to be bought off by recalling it love. We love you so much. Okay, so why don't you tell the truth and offer a refund and ask how I'm feeling? And no, we just love you so much. Could you just hide this for us? And we'll tell you we love you, but you hide it. And of course, that's the inner wrenching. That takes and can divide the self again. Every time you divide the self, you weaken the self. Every time you weaken the self, the more support you need. But when your support structure is corrupt, the more you get damaged. And so it becomes a vicious circle. And so the little boy wants to believe in the words of love. The adult is saying, this doesn't feel like love. There's something very wrong here if this is what love is. Because I'm feeling worse and worse every day, and you don't want to hear about it, let alone apologize and respond. This is subhuman. This isn't grandiose love and unconditional. This is subhuman. This is subhuman behavior out of terror and shame being repackaged as a grandiosity of unconditional love. And then you're trying to tell me I should be grandiose and forgive you, as in Peter Sandhill telling me that his therapist, no, Peter Sandhill consulted an attorney, and when he understood that he was screwed, he passed on advice to me from his attorney. And he said, my attorney advises you to see this as the South African peace accords, where everyone just forgave the victors and there was a kind of smooth transition. There wasn't any rioting and all that, And of course, the only difference is that we'd like it to be a South African peace accords where nobody ever finds out. So unlike the public hearings, which is what integrated the community, was bringing all the data points out into the public. That's what heals a community and helps it go from being insane and shadow adverse into integrating its dark shadow and its light shadow honestly and reassessing trust points with real data. You can trust this person 70%. You can trust this person 80%. You can trust this person in this area a lot, in this area not at all. You need that data to reintegrate a community. But Peter Sandhill wanted to have the forgiveness part of the South African peace accords without the public part, so that nobody could know, and he could continue being grandiose to other people rather than people saying, well, you're a terrible therapist in everything you've done with Dane. Why should I take more drugs because you tell me to? Why you've made, here you are doing your same mistakes again, because they see the pattern. And this is the thing that de-seats a corrupt power structure, because a power structure gets legitimacy from effectiveness. If someone says, I am a therapist, and they have a license, and they have the training, and they actually help people, and you want that kind of help, and you get it, you've got a legitimate dynamic. They get paid, they have their legal rights, and blah, 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 and people keep coming through. An illegitimate power structure says, you've got to pay us, and we're great. But lots of people are getting hurt, and we cover it up, because that would damage the legitimacy, and so there becomes a communication control to compensate for poor ethics and efficacy in the actual treatment. No drug company will let the bad studies get out, because many of their drugs cause more side effects and aren't, just to get rid of a headache. Is it really worth 1 in 1,000 people develop brain tumors, one of this? And no, it's not. But they don't want that to come out because they've invested a lot of money in their drug. So the secrecy and denial is the final capping of the abuse, because it says, at the end, you're not as important as we are. We're not going to spend energy to help you. We're going to spend energy to cover it up. HI, the Human Awareness Institute, has never spent a penny to help me, to acknowledge, to do anything like that. They haven't apologized. But they have spent thousands of dollars hiring attorneys to try and shush the thing up. Because helping me would say that you matter. And to cover it all up says you are not valuable. We are valuable. Our reputation is valuable. And you see, this all sounds absolutely terrible, which produces more fear. And more fear of shame for the Human Awareness Institute staff and facilities. So then there's the idea that, well, of course, Dane doesn't matter, but we should work harder to cover it up. How are we going to spin this? How are we going to prepare? How are we going to do testimony? You don't matter. Our reputations matter to the last. And this is the ultimate disease of a species in a sociopathic period of its evolution, where there is not the psychological training present to create the technologically possible world of abundance and safety. There is no there is no shortage of resources, financial resources, health resources, emotional resources. There is a superabundance of resources. The Human Awareness Institute had the resources to respond to this issue. Peter Sandhill had the resources to respond to this issue. What there is a psychological scarcity, where certain things trigger fight, flight, freeze, trauma dynamics that suggest a scarcity dynamic. And then that scarcity dynamic of going down an endless pipe where you spend more and more energy to cover things up that are corrupt rather than changing them, That is what creates the ultimate scarcity. That's what it takes an enormous amount of, like the Human Awareness Institute have had many meetings in order to discuss how to not deal with this. They've consumed far more energy silencing a dirty and shameful secret than they have growing and changing. And that's what creates the scarcity. The belief that you are not valuable leads to the desperation to cling to a social ranking system that says, no, I know I'm not valuable, but as long as I'm a facilitator, as long as no one knows I'm a sexual abuse perpetrator, as long as someone knows I'm not, an idiot, then I will be given some love and support. So as soon as any, hint of the shadow element we all have, none of us are perfect, as soon as that shadow element presents itself, the panic is, I could never be loved if this comes out, and so I've got to climb up my cult and protect it. Well, what does that mean? Well, get rid of the patients, kill them, kill off your ex-lover. She might talk to the police or whatever. Kill them, get rid of them, because I've got to keep climbing, because I'm not lovable. The only way I have a chance in this fucked up cult is if I keep climbing cultural ranking systems. You see, Bill Clinton, with his police cronies, managed to terrorize and perhaps even murder a few of his victims. The U.S. government is successful in silencing most of its whistleblowers. The Human Awareness Institute almost killed me with a protocol that was designed to destroy all self-esteem, all sense that I matter. Because the part of me making this video is the counter, is the medicine, is saying I matter, you matter. The human beings inside the high facilitators matter. Their sociopathic protocols and defenses may not matter that much in terms of being worth saving. But the human beings, the scared little children that are trying to get out and still be socially acceptable, they all matter. And it doesn't matter whether they're billionaires or on the street. Now, of course, we're getting the opposite message from our culture. Every time we see the same homeless person under the bridge again, we understand that 100,000 cars drove by and none of them said that that person mattered. We understand that we're living in a culture where you can't pick up the phone and say there's a homeless person, please help them. But you can pick up a phone to say there's a stray dog. Dogs are more important than people. Wetlands are more important than people. If someone starts violating a wetland, oh my goodness, the trucks will pull up within hours. Wetland violations, my goodness. Someone's raping a human being under a bridge. Someone's got AIDS and needs heat. You don't matter. Your money matters. So this is the cycle of abuse. And it's compounding things because there are then numerous ripple effects from each of these, and I want to talk briefly about that. So the lack of study, for example, by the Human Awareness Institute prior to taking money to treat leads to dismal outcomes. Those dismal outcomes mean the difference between a transcendent and healthy and spiritual awakening and me collapsing into PTSD. That's the impact of not studying and not caring enough to study. The me before you collapsed me into such a small state of shame, despair, etc., that I found myself compulsively just trying to avoid pain and not able to function. Not able to function caused my business and business service to go down with various ratings, meant that I couldn't manage a house construction project that I was beginning. The damaging action, like the pushing for the overdose and stuff, meant falling in love with my therapist rather than staying at a level that felt safe and comfortable for me, and not, it's so odd because on the one hand, Peter pushed me into incapacity. He pushed me into incapacity by insisting on a high dose that disables a lot of my strength, which is analysis. That says, this doesn't sound quite right. Like, I've never cheated on a lover in my entire life. Because I say that doesn't add up to good math. If I want to have sex with someone else, I can just end this relationship or communicate that with my partner. We can have a separation or whatever, and I can go be sexual with someone else. But I don't break up relationships because I want to have sex with someone else. Or I've had so I've never cheated on anyone. I've never lied to a friend or partner, because that's what this brain says doesn't make good math sense. I don't like it when people do that to me. It hurts. It makes no sense, because then the person others are loving is a lie, which means they're not loving you at all. They're loving the image that you're projecting because you don't believe you're lovable. When you lie, there is a fundamental undertone that says who I am really is not lovable, and I know that. But I'm hoping you'll love the lie that I present. I have never wanted to be loved for the lie I present. The part that desperately needs love and that seeks love constantly is the parts that no one in this culture will love, like this part, telling the truth. This is the part that I want to be loved, the part that has had the truth my entire life and been shut up about it for decades. Could someone love that part of me because he's real and I care about him? I don't want to be loved by, oh, aren't you a wonderful person, and flat. I want to be loved for the parts that are good that this cult is scared of. That would mean a lot to me. And there's only one way to get it, and that's to express these parts, watch any number of people just evaporate into the mist and judge and do this, and then a few small people say, I like the world you're going for. I would like it if every sexual abuse survivor spoke up like you did. I'd like it if we lived in a world where people mattered more than money, where we housed our human beings rather than spent more money chasing them by the police and locking them up and having them be in the ER because they're cold. And that's the world I'd like to live in, and thank you for being a part of it. Now, I'm willing to pay the price of looking at my own dark shadow, of looking at our cult's corruption, of facing my own terror of my government and this and that and the other. You don't think you'll be thrown into a black site? If you commit some this, that, it's in the new terrorism laws? Oh, live and learn. People matter. So that's who I want to be loved for. So the fact that Peter Sandhill hates me for telling the truth meant he never loved me in the first place. He loved his projection of his delusion. And when a real human being arrives, he can't deal with it because it doesn't jive with his self-image. And he's in love with his self-image. That's promising to get him out of the pit with cultural ranking or this, or whatever it is, pit. People have sex addictions, people have power addictions, people have all kinds of, whatever it is. That's the thing that feels good and doesn't feel bad, something we're all aspiring to as human beings. And so that's the bit that was knocked out by the high overdose. And then the bit that tried to help Peter, I said, please, Peter, let me be your teacher around this. Let me teach you how to navigate around this terrain. He wasn't interested, because to learn in the chauvinistic ranking system means that I might be bigger. It's not true. Someone in this culture who is a good student is far bigger than a teacher, because we bestow grandiosity on teachers and we bestow inadequacy on students. We actually believe in our culture that the teacher is more valuable than the student. It doesn't hold up mathematically, but we do it anyway. And so to be a real sincere and humble student is a place that says that we've transcended the culture's message that you don't matter, that your rank matters, but you don't. Because it's fun to learn and it's intelligent. The most intelligent thing you can do is pick someone who knows a lot more than you do in a given area and let their many painful hours of experience or years of training and stuff help you be more graceful faster. That is the most intelligent thing a human being can do, is to pick people that know a lot more than they do and humbly open to that. But that is not the position of power in the cult. That's why men say, I knew that. And now women, I knew that. Don't tell me. Don't try to teach me anything. I knew all that. I'm not going to take an inferior position But the very cult buy-in that says that you don't matter and the cult ranking system is an inferior position. It's saying that you don't matter as much as your cult ranking system. And so you're going to stay ignorant and dumb your whole life just because you don't want to feel weak, because your cult is too dumb to understand that being a student is one of the most intelligent things you can do? That's what you're going to do? That's not smart. But Peter categorically rejected, as did Jason Weston, learning from me. Because it plays with that, I'm bigger, better, more important than you. I'm the big one, you're the small one. No one at the Human Awareness Institute was big enough to occupy the small role, which means the truth becomes the enemy, which then means that I am treated as if I am the enemy. Patronized, lied to, communication controls, help refused, empathy withdrawn, this and that. When you treat your client as the enemy, you are dealing within the cult ranking system. You're not dealing with a human being, to a human being. There are no enemies at a human essence level. And certainly not your clients. And certainly not therapeutic clients that agree to trust you to become better human beings and prioritize their money to be spent in that way. Thank you for listening.